it's a vicious cycle, right? You know, strong men will create great times, and great times will create weak men. I feel we're truly in that result of weak men creating hard times is where we are right now.
Anyway, so all this to say, it's going to be really interesting to see how the United States especially handles this falling from the global power, if they're going to be able to shift things around in order to actually maintain themselves as a global power, and how they're going to deal with China increasing power and more over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah. So a couple arguments for why people don't think they're going to be able to, which I've heard from people with high political, influence, is the fact that, like, one of the facts that the U.S. has by far the largest military presence throughout multiple countries, 85 in particular, where they have military bases. To develop that type of infrastructure, no other country would be able to do that in a decent amount of time. So that's one of the arguments. Whether or not that's an actual valid argument, I have no fucking clue. But that's a pretty prevalent argument that I'm hearing from pretty people with a lot of clout. And again, the lack of stability in those particular countries that want to essentially join. Over and above that, again, I don't really have 40% increase in military budget. That's a big odd thing. One of the things that I might have to lean on a little bit is the fact that the U.S. has a very soft government right now, I feel. Like, outrageously soft. I don't feel like this type of stuff, maybe it would eventually happen, but I have to imagine that, like, if you have a very strong leader, this stuff might not happen.
Exactly.
You know
and
what
I
I'm
think
saying?
that's going to be a pivotal thing for the United States, so especially next year.
Yeah.
There's a one guy in the States that's phenomenal. You've shown me his videos before.
He's a governor?
Yeah, he's going to be
DeSantis?
It might be DeSantis.
The Florida guy?
What's it I'm thinking of? Anyways, regardless, the 2024 election is going to be really dependent on getting a strong leader in there in order to and for the next several elections, because if you have and regardless of political party, whether you're right wing or left wing, I just think you need, especially if you're going to be the global leader, politically, economically, from a defense side, you need to have a leader that's going to back that up.
I actually find it really odd that either these countries know something about the way that China operates behind closed doors, or the information that these guys are providing that I listen to as arguments are not accurate in terms of their political and their economic.
Maybe it's not that it's not accurate.
Policies are not stable.
It might be just slightly biased, and not that it's incorrect.
Yeah.
Right.
But you got to think, like, those types of political regimes, communism, socialism, all of those Marxism, like those types of political regimes, they don't end up producing, like on paper, everybody's happy, all this kind of stuff, but those things don't typically produce a stable economy, stable monetary policies. Like those types of regimes do not produce that type of outcome, historically speaking.
Well, actually, see, I disagree. I think it's the polar opposite. I think that the United States is the very first time in all of history that you've been able to have democracy come to a world power, the number one world power.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Like, if you look at
democracy isn't synonymous with, like, socialism and communism and stuff like that.
No, but I would argue that the majority of world powers throughout the last, let's say, 1,000 years were communist-like governments.
I agree.
Authoritarian.
Yeah, I agree.
Even think of, like, the royal family and the rule of Great Britain over 200-300 years.
Yeah, I agree. But the outcome of that is, like, a very unstable, very unhappy society. Like, look at China. They could just do whatever they want. They could seize your money. They could keep you locked in your fucking house. Like, that shit's crazy. That's
Oh, I'm not saying
cool.
I'm not saying I agree with it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, like, their culture is just used to that.
Like, I agree. And like, here's the thing. Maybe it does actually produce a stabler economy because you have one guy running the show. Maybe it does. But the problem is if you get that one guy that says, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I don't really care what happens. And then it actually happens. Like, this is why I have to imagine that it's not a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things that and in addition that the United States is has struggled with and will continue to struggle with is just how divided the country actually is.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's so hard to continue to progress and be a dominant world leader when you have both politically and in terms of your people so far divided.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that communism is the answer.
Yeah,
I'm not saying socialism is the answer.
Right? That's what you get with democracy, right? Like, some people just don't see your shit the same way.
Do you think that the United States is more divided now than they have been over the last 100 years? Or do you think,
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the days of
let's call it like 50s and 60s.
The Civil War.
Oh, no, not back 300 years in the U.S. I'm saying, like, let's compare it to like the 50s.
Would that have been the Civil War 300 years?
Both 300.
I don't think so.
Of 1812, 200 years ago.
Yeah, 200. Yeah. I honestly, I don't know. Like
1776, one of the two. 200 to 250 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't around in the fucking 60s, right? But, like, you know, arguably, I'd say in our lifetime for sure. You know, our lifetime, no question, for sure. And now here's another thing too, right? It also wasn't until Donald Trump where I even cared about politics, because he is a polarizing guy.
Yeah.
And he made a lot of people start paying attention to politics. So I don't know, right? The only thing that I really started paying attention to prior to, like, say 2016, which is when I believe that's when he got in.
Yeah, 2016.
Was like the 2008 financial crash in like the Great Recession, because it was somewhat a little bit politically driven, I feel, back then, and I kind of got a little some little snippets of like what was going on financially back then. Other than that, I don't even remember who was like in. It might have been Bush. Yeah. Like, who the fuck knows?
Yeah, it would have been Bush.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what do you think, in your opinion, is the most vital things for the United States to either put into place or to keep in place for them to maintain being a world superpower?
Oh, man.
Do you agree that the U.S. is in a very, very like fragile state right now compared to what it has been over the past, let's say, 100 years?
Yeah, and I believe it's because of the a lot of the democratic policies that have like swept the nation, in a sense of, you know, if you don't like something, just take to the streets and wreak havoc. Or if you, this whole notion of, it seems like they're really perpetuating this weakness of men lately. I know you probably don't want to, go down this rabbit hole.
I asked you the question of what you think is going to be important.
But I truly,
I want your genuine opinion.
I truly believe what we're seeing now is a very accurate representation of how weak men producing hard times. I think over the last decade, especially, prior to that decade, you had, arguably, strong men changing the tides of a difficult time in society after, call it the Great Recession. And it's a vicious cycle, right? Strong men will create great times, and great times will create weak men. I feel we're truly in that. We're in the result of weak men creating hard times is where we are right now. I truly believe that. I feel like the representation, even in Canada, the representation in the U.S. is very weak. The leaders, the talking heads are very weak leaders. They're pushing this. There's like this agenda to produce this unstable, weak person in society, and I truly do feel that we would not see what we're seeing if we had stronger leaders, if we had stronger rule of law. Like, dude, go to go to these big cities that are, run majority of, that have democratic policies in place. Like their fucking rule of law is so lax. It's crazy. The guy that stabbed that guy on the TTC up in Toronto, dude, that guy was fucking arrested multiple times on like assault charges and weapons or like egregious shit. Like, and then you have, I can't remember exactly what story this was. I remember seeing this on Twitter again. A couple people, like 60 of these people that were, man, this is so, I'm paraphrasing for sure here, but somebody in the comments correct me if I'm wrong here. But there was a group of like 60 guys or something like that. One of these guys created some sort of egregious crime or whatever, and I don't remember where this was pulled from. I don't remember if it was even 60 people, but something along the lines of this group of people committed like 6,000 or were arrested like 6,000 times in like 1 year, like some stupid number, and they were let loose on the street. And then it was an average of something like, I don't even know, dude, fuck. It was like something stupid, like 150 arrests in the course of a year on average with these like 60 guys that were just let back on the street. Like this is, something's going on here, and I don't get it. I don't understand why you have these people back on the street. I don't understand why you don't have a tougher rule of law. I don't understand why, why we were talking about this earlier. My mom has relatives in Portugal.
Yeah.
They think, and now they're not, in big cities, right? They're in small cities, and actually in Azores, which is like the middle of the Atlantic, really. And they think over here, we're fucking crazy. They see how our kids behave. They see how we treat others in society, how weak-minded our society is these days. A comment that I totally forgot to even mention was one of the comments that they brought up was they feel like our men here are not men anymore, which I would agree with. Mm-hmm. You have these, and if whether you want to disagree with or not, the way that European men, the old-fashioned mindset is that like men are strong, and they're strong for a reason, and they don't understand the concept of what the fuck is going on over here. Why we, from their mind, from their perspective, we have it so good. Like they came over here because our society here is so much better. They were dirt fucking poor over there. There was basically no economy. It was Europe, right? It was very tough to get ahead and to probably because of monarchs and stuff like that, potentially, like you were saying, right? They were the rule of law back then, and it was kind of run more like a dictatorship. Who knows? I don't exactly know, but whatever, right? So they came here and they don't get it. Like even my relatives that are here that were from there don't understand what the fuck is going on. They're like, we have it so good here. It's almost like what you were mentioning to me, that you have it so good and you have no reference point of how bad it could actually be for you. You have to complain about something. And what you're actually complaining about is bullshit. Mm-hmm. So it's like producing this like vile sediment in society that is producing like just a bunch of complainers, and nothing's ever right. And like it's producing this victim mentality, and it's so interesting getting somebody that's not from here's perspective. Even Tommy, like the guy's from fucking Romania, right? Our graphics artist, if anybody doesn't know. And his parents are from Romania, and they're like, what the fuck is going on over here? Mm-hmm. Right? They saw like communism over in Romania. They left. They're here, and they're like, holy shit, the same shit's happening here in a country that we left to go to, that we thought never would happen, but the same shit's happening here. It's crazy. Like, it's so from getting those types of perspectives is very interesting, right? Because what are these people's reference points for like why the U.S. and Canada is so bad? Like, it's not bad. If it was so bad, you wouldn't have 1 million people come into Canada last year. If it was so bad, right? So I'm very biased on the fact that my viewpoint is very simple. We're at a time right now where let's not even say necessarily society, or not even necessarily say men. Society is outrageously weak right now, and is producing a very unstable, weak time in society. And we're going to need strong people, and especially men, to change the tides of things. And whether or not that happens, I don't know. But I truly do feel that that's what we're dealing with here. And I think it's indicative of our actual leaders. They're extremely weak. And whether or not they actually are, they sure do look that way and come off that way. You get what I mean? And I believe that that's what's going on. I also pretty much agree with Samantha that I do feel like whether like I truly do feel like that was I don't feel like anything is like accidental anymore. I feel like everything is very calculated. I think the argument for a lot of people is that governments are not able to conspire together. But like, what do you mean? Look at what's going on right now, right? You have all these people that have known nothing else but conflict that are all of a sudden just getting along. Like, I don't think that that's some sort of coincidence, right? And then nor do I think that it's impossible to get these guys in a room. They're always in a room together to say, hey, I've got this idea for us to come into power. Like, how the fuck is that so like impossible to fathom? Like, dude, we were literally getting locked in our houses and arrested on the street. Like, I don't care. Anything's on the fucking table these days. I don't give a shit. So for us, so for me to believe that wasn't purposely, or, you know, there was some sort of, you know, behind closed door agent doing it, like where there was like this fucking militia doing it, like who the fuck knows what. But I don't believe that this was like some sort of fucking accident. Too many things fell into place because of that whole situation. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I honestly believe, because like there's obviously people that are on social media right now talking about a third world war, or essentially a war between China and the U.S. The thing is that China and the U.S. are so developed nowadays that I don't believe that we're going to see a war how war has been in the past. I think you're going to have
a very Cold War or something like that.
Exactly.
Economic war.
Exactly. Yeah. You're going to have, that's 100%. When you look at the Russian invasion into Ukraine, like Russia and Ukraine aren't extremely developed nations. Yeah. Right? Sure, yeah. They're more developed than some other countries.
Corrupt as fuck.
Exactly. Yeah. They're still going to have a more archaic way of fighting a war. Yeah. Right? I honestly believe that you're not going to have soldiers with guns if it was the United States versus China. Yeah. I honestly believe that it's going to be some form of Cold War, of some sort of cyber war, of some sort of economic war, or more specifically, biological warfare.
Maybe, which we arguably just saw. Exactly. And you like this is why I don't actually think you might not see it. Like, these countries might need more time to develop so that China can hawk their shit to them, right? U.S. is the biggest consumer of goods and services by far in the entire world. Guess who we buy the most shit from? Mm-hmm. It's China. So what are we going to do? We're going to cut their pipeline off? We can't do that, and China can't do that, right? So it doesn't make sense for us to go to war with China. Mm-hmm. It makes zero sense economically. Both countries would fucking suffer like crazy, right? Could you imagine trying to get shit made over in Canada at like the average minimum wage here, what we have? It would be nobody would be able to afford anything. No. But
that's what I wonder. It's like, could China, maybe not right now, but in 10, 20 years from now, could China cut off the U.S.?
Of course. And because right now, China's overall minimum wage is $10. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what the average person in China, like, so their minimum, their middle class is rising. Yeah. Right? or their average wage, not their minimum wage. Their average wage is $10 now, I believe.
Yeah.
So that came a long way from just like a few years ago where it was like $2. Right. So their middle class is like moving very quickly.
Yeah.
So how long will it take for a country like China that has 3-4 times the population to catch up, where China doesn't even need to send their goods to the U.S. with a population of 300 million. Or maybe, hey, you know what? Let's prop up India's economic standards or standard of living, so that they also have another couple billion that they could hawk their shit to, or a billion or whatever, right? So, and then you got Russia, huge country. You've got Mexico. Like, all these other countries have way more population together, way more. So is that the move, right? But because like right now China can't, like, I still feel like both countries still have to tread lightly.
I agree.
With each other, right?
Yeah.
Because one's making everything, the other one's buying everything. So where does that start changing the dynamic?
Yeah, but if you look at look at China as a business, the market cap of China has been increasing exponentially. They've been having, over the past 50 years,
I think at this point,
their growth rate is one of the fastest of any country.
I think at this point, I want to say is GDP. I can't remember exactly what the number is, or some other fucking metric, where China was significantly behind the U.S. Now they're halfway there, which is a big fuck. Like, it's like 10 trillion, and the U.S. is at like 20 something trillion, or like 15 trillion, and the U.S. is like at 25 trillion. Something crazy close.
Yeah,
like approaching a growth rate where it's like too close for comfort. Hence why probably maybe that budget there has increased by fucking 40%, right? Like, so I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen here. I wonder what's gonna happen for us, because we buy everything in US dollars.
You're talking about our business specifically, or Canada?
No, our business specifically. Yeah. Like, what's going to happen, because we buy everything in U.S. dollars. If that doesn't happen anymore, what the fuck's the answer? Do you get what I mean? Like, what are we going to do? But at the same time, too, if that happens, it fucks with our business. It fucks with everybody's business. So we're in the same boat. It doesn't really matter, right? So, very interesting times.